For decades, the Western told America a comforting lie. That violence was clean, that killers were heroes, that justice came from the barrel of a gun. Men rode into town, they did what had to be done, and they rode out as legends. Unforgiven arrives to bury that myth. Released in 1992, at a time when the Western was already considered a dying genre, this film did not revive it. It executed it. This is not a movie about gunslingers at their peak. It is a movie about what happens after the legend fades, about men who cannot escape what they've done, about violence that never feels glorious, and about a country that was built on blood, then pretended it wasn't. This documentary is not about plot. It's about what Unforgiven takes away, because this film doesn't ask if violence is justified. It asks what it costs and who pays it. Fact 16. Unforgiven destroys the heroic Western from its first frame. Most Westerns begin with strength, riders, landscapes, purpose. Unforgiven begins with weakness, an aging man struggling in the mud, a widower who can't even mount his horse properly, a former killer who now raises pigs. The film immediately strips away myth. This is not the West of confidence. This is the West after consequences. By opening with decay instead of power, the movie announces its intent. The legend is over. What remains is the damage. Fact 15. William Money is not a redeemed man. He is a survivor. Many films frame aging killers as men seeking redemption. Unforgiven refuses that comfort. William Money does not believe he has been forgiven. He does not believe he deserves peace. He believes only that he is still alive. The film presents Money as a man defined by restraint, not morality. He doesn't avoid violence because it's wrong. He avoids it because he knows exactly what it does. This distinction matters. The movie doesn't offer redemption arcs. It offers survival, and survival is far uglier. Fact 14. Violence is never skilled. It is always messy. In classic Westerns, killing is elegant. Fast draws, perfect shots, clean deaths. Unforgiven rejects that fantasy completely. Gunfights are clumsy, shots miss, men panic, victims beg. The film refuses to let violence feel competent or admirable. It shows killing as confusing, terrifying, and irreversible. This is one of the film's boldest choices, because once violence looks ugly, it becomes impossible to cheer for. Fact 13. The film removes glory from revenge. At the heart of the story is a revenge premise, but Unforgiven empties it of satisfaction. There is no righteous anger, no moral high ground. The act of revenge does not restore balance. It compounds damage. The film suggests something deeply unsettling. Revenge doesn't heal wounds. It extends them. By the time blood is spilled, nothing feels resolved, only worsened. The legend is already dead by the end of Part 1. One thing is clear. This is not a Western about heroism. It is a Western about aftermath. The guns still exist, the violence still happens, but the lies are gone. In Part 2, we'll go deeper. We'll explore aging and guilt as central themes, masculinity stripped of romance, and why memory becomes punishment. Because in Unforgiven, the dead aren't the ones being haunted. By now, the Western myth is already in ruins. There are no heroes riding in, no young men eager for glory, no belief that violence creates order. What remains are men who have lived long enough to understand exactly what they did. And that understanding is the real punishment. Fact 12. This is a film about aging, not action. Unlike traditional Westerns, Unforgiven is not interested in youthful strength. It is obsessed with aging. Every major character is past their prime. Movements are slower. Reflexes are weaker. Confidence has eroded. The film treats age not as wisdom, but as accumulation. Every year carries weight. Every memory presses down. This is not a story about men becoming legends. It is about men living long enough to see their legends collapse. The Western hero was supposed to die young or ride away. Unforgiven forces him to stay. Fact 11. Guilt is portrayed as inescapable, not corrective. Most films treat guilt as something that leads to redemption. You feel bad, you atone, you move on. Unforgiven rejects this structure entirely. Guilt here does not purify, it does not heal, it does not resolve, it simply exists. William Money does not talk about his past to cleanse himself. He talks about it because it will not stay buried. The film presents guilt as something that ages with you. It deepens, it sharpens, it never loosens its grip. Violence leaves scars that time does not soften. Fact 10. Masculinity is stripped of romance. Classic Western masculinity is built on control, strength, decisiveness, emotional silence. Unforgiven dismantles every one of those ideals. Men cry, they panic, they hesitate, they fail. Violence does not affirm masculinity here. It exposes fragility. The film suggests that the Western ideal of manhood was always a performance. When the performance collapses, what remains is fear and regret. This is one of the most radical statements the film makes, that masculinity, as mythology, required violence to survive. And without that myth, it has nothing left to stand on. Fact 9. Memory functions as a form of punishment. In Unforgiven, the past is never distant. Stories are told. Reputations follow men from town to town. Legends are repeated and inaccurately. But memory is not nostalgic. It is accusatory. William Money cannot escape who he was because others refuse to let the story die. The film shows how memory traps people in identities they no longer recognize, but cannot deny. This creates a brutal tension. The man Money wants to be and the man history insists he was can never reconcile. Memory becomes a sentence with no release date. The cost of living long enough. By the end of Part 2, the film has made something clear. The worst fate in Unforgiven is not dying violently. It is living long enough to remember everything clearly. In Part 3, the focus shifts outward. We'll explore power and authority in the West law as violence with paperwork, and who actually controls brutality. Because in Unforgiven, the most dangerous men are not the ones without power. They are the ones who define it. By now, the film has destroyed the idea that violence creates heroes. But Unforgiven goes further. It asks a more dangerous question. Who gets to decide when violence is acceptable? Because in the Old West of this film, violence never disappears. It only changes hands. Fact 8. The law is just another form of violence. In classic Westerns, the law represents order. It stands in opposition to chaos. Unforgiven rejects this clean division. The law in this film does not end violence. It controls it. Sheriff Little Bill is not opposed to brutality. He is opposed to unauthorized brutality. Violence committed by outlaws is punished. Violence committed by authority is legitimized. The film exposes a harsh truth. Law does not remove violence from society. It decides who is allowed to use it without consequence. Fact 7. Little Bill is not a villain. He is a system. Little Bill is often misunderstood as the antagonist. But Unforgiven presents him as something more disturbing. He is not chaotic. He is organized. He is convinced he is right. Little Bill believes violence is necessary, but only when he controls it. He beats men publicly to send messages. He humiliates gunmen to discourage challenges. He enforces peace through fear. The film suggests that systems of power do not see themselves as cruel. They see themselves as practical. And that practicality makes them dangerous. Fact 6. Order is maintained through humiliation. One of the most unsettling aspects of Little Bill's authority is how he uses humiliation instead of justice. Men are beaten in public, stripped of dignity, made examples of. This is not about fairness. It is about deterrence. The film shows how humiliation becomes a tool of governance. Fear replaces trust. Submission replaces consent. By framing law enforcement as psychological domination, Unforgiven argues that order maintained by fear is still violence, just slower and more acceptable. Fact 5. Violence is only condemned when it threatens power. Throughout the film, violence is not judged by morality. It is judged by impact on authority. When violence challenges power, it is crushed. When violence reinforces power, it is excused. This inversion is central to the film's worldview. The killing of women is dismissed with money. The killing of lawmen demands blood. Unforgiven makes an uncomfortable claim. Justice in the West is not blind, it is aligned. And alignment determines whose suffering matters. Power defines morality. By the end of Part 3, one truth becomes unavoidable. Violence is not an exception in Unforgiven. It is the foundation. The difference between outlaw and lawman is not behavior. It is permission. In Part 4, the film reaches its final reckoning. We'll explore why the ending rejects redemption, how the legend returns, but poisoned, and why Unforgiven closes the Western genre forever. Because in the end, the myth does not disappear quietly. It returns, one last time. By now, Unforgiven has dismantled every illusion the Western depended on. Heroism has collapsed. Masculinity has been exposed. Law has revealed itself as organized violence. There is only one myth left to confront, the legend itself. And this is where the film delivers its final unforgiving truth. Fact 4. The final violence is not redemption, it is relapse. When William Money finally returns to violence, the moment is often misread as triumph. The music swells, the gun is raised, the legend seems to reawaken. But Unforgiven makes this moment deeply uncomfortable. Money does not reclaim honor, he abandons restraint. The film presents this act not as redemption, but as relapse. Years of discipline collapse under grief and rage. The killer Money tried to bury is not healed, he is merely dormant. This matters because the film refuses to frame violence as growth. It frames it as regression. The past does not disappear. It waits, and when it returns whole. Fact 3. The legend returns, but it is poisoned. In classic Westerns, legends inspire order. They create heroes to admire. In Unforgiven, the legend returns as a threat. Money's reputation does not stabilize the town. It terrifies it. His name carries fear, not hope. The stories people tell about him are exaggerated, distorted, and incomplete. And yet, they still hold power. The film makes a brutal point. Legends do not preserve truth. They preserve violence. And once a legend is reactivated, it consumes everyone around it, including the man who embodies it. Money survives not because he is righteous, but because others believe he is unstoppable. Fear becomes his weapon. Fact 2. There is no justice, only survival. The ending of Unforgiven offers no moral balance. The dead stay dead. The guilty are not neatly punished. The innocent are not restored. Money does not bring justice. He brings finality. The film rejects the Western fantasy that violence creates moral clarity. It shows instead that violence ends arguments, not injustice. What remains is survival. Those who live do so not because they deserve it, but because they were spared. This is one of the film's harshest truths. Survival is not virtue. It is circumstance. Fact 1. Unforgiven is a film about the lie. America told itself at its core, Unforgiven is not just about the Old West. It is about myth-making. It exposes how America romanticized its violence, how it turned killers into pioneers, how it framed conquest as destiny. The film argues that the Western was never history. It was propaganda, and Unforgiven exists to dismantle it. By stripping violence of glory, masculinity of romance, and law of purity, The film forces the audience to confront an uncomfortable reality. The country was not built by heroes. It was built by survivors, and survivors are not the same thing. Why this film permanently changed cinema after Unforgiven, the Western could never return to innocence. The genre had been interrogated too deeply. The lies had been exposed too clearly. Future Westerns would either follow this path or feel dishonest. The film did not revive the Western. It closed it. What becomes clear on rewatch bonus? Fact 1. The film becomes colder on rewatch, not warmer, because the hope disappears. Bonus fact. 2. Moments that once felt powerful begin to feel tragic instead. Bonus fact 3. Little Bill's philosophy feels more realistic and more frightening over time. Bonus fact 4. The final violence feels less like catharsis and more like inevitability. Unforgiven does not ask you to admire William Money. It asks you to understand him and then recoil. It tells you that violence does not disappear with age. It waits. It tells you that legends do not heal nations. They excuse them. And it tells you that the most dangerous stories are the ones we tell ourselves to make blood feel necessary. If this film left you unsettled, that means it did its job. And if you want cinema that doesn't glorify violence, but interrogates it, then subscribe. This channel isn't about heroes. It's about myths, power, and consequences. Before you go, answer honestly, is violence ever redemptive, or do we just need to believe it is? Leave your answer in the comments.